Alright, here's a little video where I'm going to talk about using some new features in our parametric equalizer to do guitar amp modeling. So let me show you what I've got going on. Let me show you the whole signal path. So I've got a parametric EQ going into a saturator. We haven't released this saturator yet, but you could use any saturator in that place and it would perhaps have a different sound but do some of the same things. So I've got EQ before the saturator, I've got EQ after the saturator. This is really important because the pre-EQ ends up modeling the preamp and perhaps any of the tone that you have in pedals going into the amp. And then the post-EQ will model like the speaker cabinet type of sounds. I've got a reverb with a very short delay time, half a second of decay time, and that just makes things sound like it's really recorded in a room as opposed to going direct out of the amp. It's not intended to echo. You can hear there's no echo coming from that. And then I have a little bit of delay, 15 samples, which is just a micro delay on one channel, which just creates a wider stereo effect. I'll let you hear that. Here it's off. It's not very audible with this much distortion. I could probably remove that and not change a whole lot. So that's my rig. The main part that I want to look at is the preamp, the saturator, and the speaker cabinet. So I'm calling these preamp and speaker cabinet. I think that we need to use those terms a little bit loosely because we're not modeling the whole rig in detail. We're just modeling this idea that there's some EQ going into a nonlinearity and some EQ on the way out. So I'm going to reset everything. This is one of the new things we've just done in the parametric EQ, that you can double tap on the control points to reset to 0. So here's what it sounds like with nothing. I'm going to move this down just a little bit so I can see the output gain meter, and I see I'm coming out a little bit quiet, so I'm going to put my gain up. I'll take the gain up on the output to get right to 0 dB. Alright, so that's a basic setup. You can hear it's pretty bad sounding overdrive. It's really fizzy, bass is kind of flabby. Not as flabby as it could be, but we can clean this up a lot. So one of the first things that we do when we're trying to simulate an overdrive on the gain channel or any kind of higher gain sound, usually we want to limit both the low frequencies and the high frequencies, sometimes not the high frequencies. So I'm going to start with a low pass filter, and we'll leave the high pass filter out for now. If you're going through pedals like a tube screamer, a good way to simulate a tube screamer is to have the low pass and the high pass, and a lot of distortion pedals work like that too. But if you're going straight into the amp, you often don't want to cut the high frequencies down. So I got my high pass filter cutting out the low frequencies. And this is a new thing we just did in the most recent update, is if you go all the way to the bottom, there's a 6 dB low pass filter, which if you want to get technical, is a first order low pass filter. It's the simplest kind. And previously we had this adjustable Q low pass filter, which gives you a lot of options, but the thing you get with the 6 dB, if you go all the way down to the bottom, is you see it's this really gentle roll off. And that's something that a lot of the overdrive pedals, including Tube Screamer, use. And so I'm going to put this up pretty high, like at 500 Hertz. So you can see now I've lost most of my low frequencies, and the sound has got pretty twangy. And I lost most of my overdrive too. So to compensate for that, I'm going to boost the gain back up. So now I've got plenty of drive, but it's kind of fizzy sounding. So there are two ways to cut that out. I can cut down the fizzy sound by filtering out high frequencies from the output. Let's roll this down. But if you listen carefully here, you'll see the fizz is still there. It's just muffled. So this sounds, I would say, worse than what I had before. Listen. You can kind of hear that fizziness is all still there. The way to get rid of this fizziness is to focus the input to the saturator more on the mid-range. So I think I'm going to start with this. I'm going to start by low pass filtering, again with that 6 dB low pass. Let's turn that back off and listen. Let's put it back on. Take it right down to 1000. So you can hear that's closer to the kind of sound that we would like to have, but it's not exactly what we like. Sometimes I can reduce the fizz by putting a little bit bass back in. But I don't want to put so much bass back in that it sounds bassy, because when you run bass frequencies through a distortion, they tend to get that kind of flabby sound. They lose tightness. I'm gonna go beyond the point where it sounds like I've cut too much. And the way to get back your bass sound then is you want to boost the bass after the amp. So the idea here is, when you go through the distortion section, you don't want to have too much high frequencies because that's going to sound fizzy. And you don't want too much low frequencies because that makes it sound kind of flabby. Let's boost the low frequencies to exaggerate what I mean by flabby. Let's put a lot of bass on this. You can hear is just, that's not the sound that we want in an overdrive. We want it tight and clean, but we want to have some bass on it, so I'm going to take this off again. There's without bass. Let's put the bass back in. I'll put it in at about 75 hertz. So that sounds bassier and fuller. I think what I want to do additionally is take the everything except the bass down. So we've got another new feature in this EQ, and that is that there's these skirt gain controls on the bell. So in addition to pushing one frequency up or down, you can also move all the other frequencies up or down. So I'm taking that right down to the bottom, and you can hear it sounds a little bit too dull when I do that. So I'm going to widen out the frequency range of the bass, and it's a little bit flabby. So I often put cut the low frequencies below about 110 hertz for a guitar amp. If you're playing 7-string, I don't have a 7-string guitar, but I suspect you might want to go a little bit lower, but if you go too low, it'll get flabby. And I can boost the bass even more to compensate for that bass cut that I just did. Now my volume is too loud, so I'll take the output gain down. I think I can actually make this narrower. Take the Q up. Take the frequency up a little bit. Right, so this sounds closer to the kind of overdrive sound that we would like for something that's a little bit higher gain, except that it lacks tone. It sounds like I've got the tone control knob all the way down, and of course that's because I'm cutting out the the high frequencies. So to get the tone back, I'll just put a little bit of a boost somewhere. Now if I put it up too high, this range is where the fizz is. So I got a lot of tone back there, but there's a lot of fizz that I don't want. I quite like the frequency range in about 20, 21, 2200 hertz for being able to put tone back in there without sounding fizzy. Let's take that down a little bit. Let's come a little bit back. I feel like we're still missing some presence there, so I'm going to take the skirt back up a little bit here. And let's adjust this again. I feel like maybe I want the bass to be even more focused than this. I'm going to try something really different from what I've done before. Let's take this gain back down. I had boosted the input a little bit. Let's come back down to 0 dB. So now we've kind of lost our high gain sound, and I'm going to get that sound back by boosting the mids. And let's see what frequency boosts. I'm going to boost the mids, and I'm going to take the skirt down on that bell filter. So that tone will work for some styles of music. That obviously isn't a one-size-fits-all tone. If you're looking for like the older metal sound, like Metallica Black Album sound, you can get that out of this type of setup with a little bit of a mid scoop on the output. And the mid scoop, I forget the best frequency. Let's try it here. Now for newer sounds, newer metal tones, you don't want a mid scoop like this. They like to have the mid range up, but that older style, they like to have a scoop in the mids. Let's try it there. And I think from scooping, I've kind of lost some of my presence, so I'm going to take this up higher and then scoop a little lower. That's probably too bassy. Let's say we'd have to get the mids up. And take the Q up to get it a little more focused. It's getting close. I feel like the higher notes here, they need to almost squeal when you pick them, and I might get that by taking the gain up a little higher. Probably would like to have a noise gate on this to get that even more tight. Right. So that's something close to the tone that you would want if you were playing that style. I'm going to take my mid scoop back off. And with that off, that tone sounds a little too harsh for me, so I'll take this back down. I feel like it's still lacking focus. Let's take this bass boost up a little higher. Nah, that didn't help. Sometimes you can get this tone with actually doing a little bit of mid boost in between, so you have three boosts going on, one in the bass, one in the mid, and one in the higher end. Yeah, that's going to tighten things up. Even widen this out. I've been working on this kind of stuff for weeks, trying to get a whole range of different guitar tones out of a collection of different guitars. And I've really been impressed by the way you can get almost anything you want out of this setup, from really nice clean tones to crunch tones to high gain tones. These three components of a pre-EQ plus a saturation plus a post-EQ seem to be enough to give you any flavor of tone that you want and allow you to sculpt it in any way that you need. What really impresses me about this is that previously I had thought, you have these classic pedals, and if you want good tone, you got to buy a collection of them, and then you have these amps, and you can get amp models, but they might not sound exactly like the real thing, or you can you can spend a lot of money and buy all these classic components, and that's the only way you're going to get the sound that you're looking for. And what I'm seeing as I play around with this stuff is that there's no limit to what you can do with this kind of modeling, and it doesn't really cost you much if you have an iPad. After owning the iPad, you can use pretty much any saturator you want. I hope we'll be releasing ours soon. It won't look exactly like this when we do, but you can use any saturator in here, and then you can use any EQ. Of course, I'm using our own because I like the controls that we've set up here, but this is a very universal thing. You can do it on the desktop using whatever saturator is available to you and whatever EQ is in your DAW, and you can get any kind of tone you want. So I think in the future, as we're moving closer to releasing some apps that have this technology inside of them, we'll do some more videos that show how to get different types of tone as we get closer to a final version of especially this saturator. So if you're interested in seeing that kind of stuff, hit subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and click like. That will help our YouTube ranking go up a little bit. And we'll see you in the next video.